of you have probably heard the key to overcoming stage fright is to imagine your audience in their underwear. And I can tell you the first 3 rows have been working out in the gym since last night. Okay, as Rob was saying, we're going to talk for approximately an hour, myself and Mr. Artola, and then we're going to open it up for a Q&A. I have to exit the meeting right about 10 o'clock, but others who were very knowledgeable in this issue will be handling the mic, so there should be no problem there. This is my agenda, and I just talked to you about how long this stuff would take. First of all, who are we? Mr. Artola and myself. We work for the Defense VFW Missing Personnel Office, and we're in the Operations Director. We're in the Northeast Asia branch. We have 11 analysts here, including an expert from JPAC. And what we do is we answer questions for you family members, and we go and try and help the lab find leads, and the investigators at JPAC find leads to try and find the right place on the ground so they can do the recoveries and do the personnel accounting that we're all here for. By the way, if you're wondering where we are, we're 4 blocks north of here. So we're not in Washington, D.C., we're in Northern Virginia. By the way, you probably also heard, this actually was said by JFK. For all the folks who are new here, JFK termed the Washington area as a city of northern hospitality and southern inefficiency. I wonder if folks can agree with that, I'm not sure, but that's sort of the way we see it. There was about 40% of the cases are new family members who are here for the first time. And that happens a lot at these annual meetings. So we thought an overview of where all the losses occurred would be very helpful for the general education, mainly the new folks. So that's what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes first. The majority of our losses from the Korean War occurred in North Korea. At the time, over 6,000 losses. And you'll see on some slides coming up, by the way, today, since we had 3 identifications in the last few days, our slides are already obsolete. That's actually a good thing. We concentrate, particularly for North Korea, we concentrate on 2 major battle areas because of the losses in North Korea. 2,600 of these losses actually occurred in 2 major battle areas. 8th Army battles on the Chanchan River in the western side of the peninsula, and on the eastern side was the famous Chosin Reservoir battle with the 1st Marine Division on the left side of the reservoir and the 7th Infantry Division on the right-hand side. Jumping to South Korea, there were about 1,000 individuals lost during the time frame of the summer of 1950 and the spring of 1951 up to about June of 1951. And in these battles, they were the retrograde operations of the 24th Infantry Division who fought back to the Busan perimeter, and then the fight back to across the DMZ, then being pushed back again by the Chinese and pushing the Chinese back again. And those are rough numbers where we're looking for individuals who are still lost there. Around July 51 to July 53, the war became a stalemate like the stalemate of World War I. It was trench warfare, attacks back and forth, attacking major hills, losing major hills, attacking them back again, that sort of thing. We lost about 1,000 individuals in what is now the demilitarized zone. The Army Grace Registration thought at the time that about 80 could still be recoverable. Now, we'll say this, see there in the bottom bullet. In 1951 to 1955, Army Grace Registration Services worked the battle areas in South Korea up towards the DMZ, and they recovered over 25,000 war dead, along with the division quartermaster companies. At the time, 451 individuals could not be identified and were shipped out of Kokura, Japan as unidentified to the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu. At the moment, there are 434 still in the ground who we have not identified yet. There's a lot of Air Force bases here and some Navy aviation. In our air war, we lost about 900 air losses. Most of the air activity occurred in the western part of the North Korean peninsula because the western part is flatter, so it had the road networks and the railway networks. Those railway networks were defended in layers of air defense by North Korean, Chinese, and Russian air defense artillery. Also, you see that there's a circle and there's an oval up there. The circle there is Ming Alley, where the Russians flew combat air patrol from about November 50 to the end of the war. And the Chinese that they trained also flew the famous MiG-15, and their airspace was down below Pyongyang. So you had a combination of enemy air defense on the ground and combat air patrol in the air, which made it difficult for our pilots. In addition to that, the Chinese had 8,000 scouts whose job was to sit on mountaintops and signal when our low-flying aircraft were coming across into their zone. And all that means that it was very hard for anyone flying over the northern side of the peninsula not to be noticed by the enemy. Okay, this is your scatter pattern. Here's where the actual losses are, where it says there's circles with Ks. That's where we have a lost aircraft in the north. And here's where we have a lost aircraft in the south. Now I'm going to talk about our major research projects. This is what Rob was saying, where we get into the details of our work. We have two major research projects I'll be talking about. The POW camp survey. It's the first one. The point of the POW camp survey was we started doing this research in our office in 1995, and we found that at the National Archives, the POW camp records were not automated, and they were hard to find. They weren't all in one place. And so we started to research every single camp that was known of in North Korea and elsewhere, trying to figure out the populations of those camps, who died in them and so on, when they were occupied, the exact cemetery locations of those camps, and then track the POW movements from point of capture to the individual, to the specific camps. We also left some United Nations cemeteries behind in North Korea, and some of those were completely emptied out by the Chinese and North Koreans and given back to us. But some of them they did not. We don't have a record of getting back the individual buried there. So we also studied that in addition to the POW camps. I'm going to go through the camps to show you what we found. These are the major camps and holding points in North Korea. You see the camp 1 through 5, the northern, the northwestern part. Camp 1 through 5 were occupied from January 51 to August of 53, and those were the camps operated by the Chinese. We know where all the cemeteries were in the camps, and we know by name who did not come back from those camps. The Army intel, the returning POWs, people studying the camps, government folks studying the camps, drew diagrams with the help of the POWs. This is a diagram of Camp 5. I think everybody here, they look like they do yoga. You have to tilt your head to the side when you're looking at this because the north point is going that way, east and west instead of north and south. That's because we just couldn't get the camp in the frame. So this is the sideway view of it. The mouth there, you can see there, those open jaws, that's the Yellow River. There are 5 separate cemeteries in this camp that we are interested in. And there's over 400 individuals that we have recorded that did not come back, that we know died in this camp. You see up there with the apex camps with the blown up symbol there. Very early in the war, as the North Koreans were overrunning South Korea, they captured 750 guys from the 24th Infantry Division. That's where they ended up. There's known cemeteries in that camp too. In October 51, the Chinese moved those guys down to the Chinese camps on the Allen River and just left those as they were. So we know where the cemeteries are. We know we want to get back to them. We've asked the North Koreans about getting back to them. That's still on the to-do list. Okay, you see where it says Air Pirate Prison and Dandong? You've heard over time about POWs who went to China, and we know specific names of people who went to China, and we know specific camps. The Air Pirate Prison was where the Chinese would put air pilots or aviators who were shot down over Chinese airspace, and the Chinese considered these Cold War incidents, not Korean War incidents. So they held 15 of our own aviators plus a Canadian up in the Air Pirate Prison in Mukden until the early part of 1955, and then they returned them. There was about another 100 individuals from the main POW camps who were hauled over to the Dandong border city to be interrogated by Chinese and Russians. But these 100, which went in driblets from the camps, were also brought back. We don't know of anyone who went to Dandong to be interrogated who didn't come back from there. Now, I'll also tell you, there's reporting of in the National Archives of war, in the war era, of thousands of POWs in camps in China, 25 different locations in camps in China. This is very intriguing for people who are trying to work this accountability during the war. And there's individual agent reporting. They didn't know how reliable it was. But when all the prisoners came back, the prisoners didn't talk about people who were hauled out and sent into China without coming back. We also don't have the type of POW populations that would occupy these camps by the thousands. And so they remain a mystery as to whether the camp existed and who was in it. It's still something we have understudied. Because in our camp survey, we looked at end-to-end of all the POWs, and the vast majority of POWs had a death date because the death date was based on POWs who saw them die or who buried them, so they could not have gone to China. POW march routes, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. There are over 700 individuals who were reported lost on POW march routes. And so we took great care to differentiate between people lost on march routes and people who died in camps. And to an extent, JPAC has actually been able to walk some of these march routes, and they did recover 4 individuals off of a march route in the early 2000s. So there is, for people lost on a march route, they can be found, though this is a difficult task. There's also march routes in South Korea. So we took a lot of time to figure out which POWs were hauled north, died in the POW camp there, which POWs died along the way. And we think there was about 60 individuals who died in South Korea along POW march routes. The JPAC has been working these since 2007, and around 2008, I believe it was, they did recover 4 individuals on POW march routes. So this is an ongoing project still. Another one of the difficult cases. Those 60 are very difficult cases. Now, when we do our POW study, we look at the work that was done by the Army G2, the JAG folks, Far East Command J2, the Army Adjutant General. They compiled lists, and the individual POWs actually compiled lists of people who are missing in action. And I want to show you some of the more common lists. Johnny Johnson list. Sergeant Wayne Johnson was among the people hauled north into the Apex camps as part of the 750 POWs who got hauled up by the North Koreans up there in far North Korea. He kept a list of everyone who died. It was about, I think it was 495 named list of the people who died in captivity there. Either he saw them or people came and told him about them. And the Johnny Johnson list came to light through a Reader's Digest article in 1997, and we got hundreds of letters asking if their loved one was on the Johnny Johnson list. And so when we do the case summaries, you have a yes or no on whether your man was on the Johnny Johnson list. That way the question's automatically answered. But they're 24th Division men. Almost all of them were 24th Division men, so the other units don't apply here. Now, the second bullet there, at the time of the POW exchanges, we were keeping track, that is the Far East Command, J2, Army Adjutant General, the other service, were keeping track of, from POW interviews, who we thought should still be alive being held by the Chinese and North Koreans after September 1953. And when the POWs came out in Operation Big Switch, they did these kind of crude computerized searches and so on, and they used basic automation and came up with these lists. The first list was 944 individuals, and they handed this list to the Chinese and North Koreans. They found the gentleman and said, "What did you do with these 944 individuals?" And that was part of a 3,000-man group, because most of the people on the list were ROC soldiers. The 944 of them were American soldiers. And the communists would give us flippant answers or blow us off or say, "We gave that guy back to you." And we did find out that our list was pretty sloppy. But over a period of years, the service activities that were monitoring this list took names off of it when they found witnesses who said a prisoner died in North Korea, or when someone was identified. So by 1962, that list of 944 worked was at 389 names. And even at 389 names, there's still a lot of problems on that list. Like the Chinese would not have any idea who someone was. The guy's name was there on there by complete mistake. And today, 7 people on the 389 list are buried in the United States. So that will tell you how sloppy the work was at the time. Just the nature, we weren't in the information age. They had what they were going with and what they went with. The 944 names, that was just a very early put together list to give to the Chinese because it was all part of the armistice negotiations. But it is what it is. Okay, this bottom one here, we also put on your case summaries whether an individual was noted on a computerized list called persons MIA captive status. This is a rough list from Operation Big Switch that POW returns from August, September 53. This is a computerized list of the POWs who returned and who they saw dying in the prison camp, or who they heard dying in the prison camp, or who they last knew to be alive in prison camp. And it's about this thick. It's sorted 2 different ways. By the individual who saw the unaccounted for individual, and then the list of the unaccounted for individuals, and who all saw them. So it's a handy reference document. It's not perfect, but it was the best thing they had available in September 1953 as a snapshot on who they thought was still unaccounted for and who saw them. Now, in your files in Hawaii, services have access to these files because they're computerized. The individual witness statements from POWs are in the files. So if your guy was seen by a POW returning, that witness statement will end up in your file. And that statement or numerous statements may end up in your file. Seoul Pyongyang Blackboard list. The group after the Johnny Johnson list, since there were guys captured between Seoul and Daejeon, there was a group of 24th ID guys and 1st Cavalry Division guys also captured by the North Koreans who ended up being shot. They were executed in mass just north of Pyongyang. But they left their names on blackboards, in school blackboards in Seoul and Pyongyang. So that's how we know who they are. But 100 of those guys did survive because the 187th Airborne Brigade plus 1st Cavalry Division essentially intercepted the North Korean trains that these guys were on, and they stopped some of the executions, essentially. 100 guys also did survive. It's a very sad story, but that's how we know who these people were. Nielsen Henderson list. We never found this list, and it's 15 Air Force names who it looks like they may never been in captivity, but are very common to other names of individuals who were in captivity. So it's still a mystery as to how this list originated and if it's got legitimate names on it or not. we're still looking for it. John Zimmerlich, one of his projects, was also looking for it in the archives. All right, wrapping up on the POW camp survey, in about, I would say maybe 7 years of research, we got all finished with our camp study. We found that there were 12 main camps and 6 UN cemeteries that needed to be investigated by JPAC at the point they could get there, at the point the North Koreans would let them up there. We knew the populations were in those cemeteries, and we knew down to 100 meters where the cemeteries were. We also tracked the movements of all the individuals listed as prisoners of war and figured out when they died, who saw them die, and we automated that list because in the archives before that there was no automated list. And what that does, as I mentioned for us, is it gives JPAC then a ready list to go into North Korea with those names if we can ever get back there. I'll also say that the lists are used when punch bowl reviews are done and when K208 reviews are done, and I'm going to go into a bit yet on that. You've heard some about the North Korean turnovers from 1990 to 1994. They returned 208 boxes, caskets of remains, and for the vast majority of them, they gave a county and province name, sometimes a village name, where they got these caskets. There was significant commingling because the North Koreans didn't do a good job of the remains collection, and in 1994 we actually asked them to stop doing that. Let's go to North Korea and do it together. And so here's where the clusters were. And so that's what we knew about the caskets. Where they came from, where the Koreans said they came from. 75 boxes came from a town called Suwon. That's what the North Koreans sold, Suwon. So we had to figure out, on these 75 caskets, who could the populations be that they're talking about for these caskets? Because you have to know a population before you can start really figuring out who these folks are. And the lab will explain that. That's how they do their work there about narrowing down populations. Well, with the POW camp survey, we determined who exactly died in Suwon. It was over 220 individuals who got removed and when the camps were used and then abandoned. So we had a very good name list for them to work off of. Also, in the late 90s, we and JPAC gave the services priority list for collecting DNA because we knew we had a population we could identify from the North Koreans and work on the Suwon camp population. And so the services did, Army did, these are almost all Army. Army did a great job of finding you guys, and you guys did a great job of providing samples. And we now have 93% FRS rate for people who died in the Suwon camps. That is something you folks did for us. And as a result of that, JPAC has been able to re-articulate all these badly commingled remains and using mtDNA as the piece of evidence to help put that back together. And they've done 37 identifications. And over half of them have just been in the last 3 years. So we'll say this is a growth industry. One of them is just about a month ago. And so they're continuing on this, making some steady progress. All right, our other research project, we talked about POW camp populations, that's one group. So then we also have air losses and ground losses. And point of our research, what we do for the air losses and ground losses, our job is to try and figure out where exactly someone was lost on the ground. Best information possible so that the lab, the investigators and anthros can go to a site and have success. And this is both North and South Korea. I'm going to talk about a few of the sources we use to help this out, help this effort out. Herb Bartolo will talk about the textual sources that we use in the archives. I'm going to talk about some selected sources. Veterans Oral History Program. About 4,000 of the 7,900 cases, just under that, maybe 3,900-ish, about 4,000 of the 7,900 cases are status missing in action from the Korean War. which means there was not an eyewitness to exactly what happened to them. All that was known was they were last seen on a specific ridge line. There's, casualty reports don't say anything, except for the day they're lost, unit they were with, and then the Army Graves Registration Service's plan to go back and investigate it. So we sort of know roughly what ridge line they're on. Well, we went out and found veterans who told us what happened to them. And we've been doing this since 1996. JPAC has also helped us and been involved. Some of these are done jointly. But we'll go, these veterans groups, they'll have reunions, they'll do it every 1 or 2 years. And so we've gone to those veterans meetings with our lost list and sat down with individual veterans to try and find out if somebody knew about someone. And from the result of our work, either by someone being named directly or by inference, like these guys all on this hill were, trench cave-in, that sort of thing. Well, we know who those guys on the hill were. So by name or by inference, we had something on 2,000 of the 7,900 individuals who were missing in action. I'll give you a little example. In one of our older history collections, there was a Chosin Reservoir Army sergeant that took a lot of pictures. And the day after Chinese overran the 31st Infantry Regiment command post, they just neatly stacked the dead from the night's fighting in one spot. And they couldn't dig holes in the ground because the ground was too frozen, so that's where they were left. So here we are, that's the 30 November 1950. In September 2001, you can see and match the landscape behind them of the two sites. Look at the road there and so on. Okay, see where that trench is, the beginning excavation point? 12 individuals were recovered from there, from that valve, exactly where the stack of dead was. So you can see there's a value of oral history. China-related research, we'll get questions about China. There's various sources you can use that ultimately originated from China. Our JCSD element, when they go through Russian archives, they sometimes find Chinese documents in the Russian archives, and there's been about a dozen air cases that relate to the Korean War that are in Russian archives because they just collected them from Chinese units. Also, if you go to China, you can go to the PLA, People's Liberation Army Publishing House, and you can just buy their stuff. They let their retired authors, retired military, become authors. They produce documents like unit histories and so on. And like they produced a unit history of all the Cold War incidents, for example, POW camp occupation, what the POW camps were like according to their perspective. And so we purchased 15,000 pages of the Chinese writings right out of the PLA Publishing House, and they're systematically going through there looking for correlations to our guys. Also, we've been talking to the Chinese since 1983 about giving us data on specific losses and data on out of archives. In 2006, they gave us a shoot-down report for a Cold War incident. That's it's classified secret. The first document they ever gave us is actually secret, and it was the first report from a mission where they shot down a Navy patrol plane off of Shanghai. Also in the realm of getting the Chinese to do stuff for us, we collected data over time, and they allowed JPAC to do recoveries in China based on the data we had collected. Two recoveries one recovery related to the Cold War, one related to the Korean War, and one related to the Vietnam War, based on the information we gave them. And JPAC did the work, JPAC or still did the work that made these three recoveries. So there's various places we can get this Chinese data. We've been working with the PLA archivist since 2008 for them to go in. Back in 1980, they explained to us, back in 1980, Chinese records were kept in regions, some filthy conditions, and the Korean War records were kept in caves in the Shenyang military region. And so as the records are being brought back to Beijing in the state-of-the-art facility they have there, they're reviewing them for our loss information. And Since that time, they've been concentrating on air. We've asked them about POWs too, but I think we're not mature in the relationship enough. They're gun shy about giving us POW data, it looks like. And I personally think it's because of their sensors, because the individual archivists do want to work with us. It's people above them. But over time, I think that can be fixed. But they've given us data on the air cases you see here. Information on 3 F-86s in the Dandong area, B-29 lost in the Dandong area, and North Korea cases as you see here on the screen. They've investigated some of these cases on their own to try and then help us out even more. And as I understand, JPAC has a mission next month to go look and investigate the 3 F-86 cases. I'm going to give you a vignette on how we use textual and veterans information to help the JPAC teams out on the ground. I'm going to use a couple of vignettes. Battle of Unsan. See, there is 293 individuals missing at the beginning of this battle. Here's one of those battles where the Chinese overran units at night. And so we have 293 individuals just lost somewhere in a 15 by 40 square kilometer area. And what we had to work with was some more diaries, some veterans interviews, POW records in there. Here's some examples of the data that the JPAC teams take with them to help them find a spot on the ground. You see the diagram on the left. That's an operations overlay, which the military people understand. This is a diagram of where the units were on the ground. And those little centipedes are the front line, dug in positions. And the flags are where the headquarters units were. And the other amoeba-looking features are where a specific company was dug in on a ridge. So that's the basis. That's where you start at when you go into an area. It's traced back from the front of the battle line and then backwards to the evacuation route. Oops. Go back. This diagram here was given to us by in our old history program. The S3, the operations officer of the 3rd Battalion 8th Cavalry, drew that map when he came out of the POW camps to show the battle positions of where the 3rd Battalion was essentially surrounded and holding out. Before that, we did not really have a good location, exact location of where that 3rd Battalion 8th Cavalry was located, and that's where there was more guys lost in this battle in that area than anywhere else. So the JPAC teams took that with them and actually made 4 battlefield recoveries right in that area. This is still an open site, so they got some work to do still. And you see the photo on the, oops, screw that one up again. You see the photo there on the left. This is the cornfield. That right there is what that looks like today. It's a cornfield. So if you go on the ground, you really need these supporting documents. Okay, what's the result of all this? The Koreans allowed us to go into the Musan area in 96, 97, and for 2000 to 2005. The search teams used the data you see listed on the left, various files from there, plus 100 interviews of people who survived this battle, told us about what they saw on the battlefield, where they were. From that, JPAC recovered and identified 34 individuals, and then the North Koreans also did their own work on this battlefield, and as a result of that, 18 more individuals have been identified. So out of our original 293, we made a pretty good dent in there, and the work continues on that. Now I'll jump to the Chosin Reservoir. There's a lot of families here that are Chosin Reservoir related. I didn't count exactly how many there were, but there's quite a few. The Chosin area was brokered, we'll say, for access from 2001 to 2005. We used the same type of records from the National Archives, field search cases, and so on. And over 100 interviews with veterans. And from that, plus the work of the punch bowl, there's been over 70 individuals identified from the work here. So you can see the value of textual and the Veterans Oral History. Very quickly, there's also some war era imagery. The Air Force used to fly recon F-84s, I guess. They'd fly F-84s fast over an area and take Hyatt-like photography to try and find what happened to units, and if there's anybody still alive and so on. And in February of '51, they flew over the Joseph Reservoir battle area, and with the help of photo interpreters, they identified specific trucks that were crashed along this evacuation route, 31st RCT, our Regimental Combat Team. And what JPAC uses this for is they can use these to verify that they're going to the right place on the ground based on this 1951 imagery. Okay, we're almost done. For y'all that have to take photographs or whatever it is, got to get out of the room. We're just going to talk briefly about recent developments. I think you all have heard about the trip the veteran took to North Korea last couple of weeks. And, they were going to take it to a crash site. The crash site was washed out. Well, we've done a lot of work on that crash site. We know exactly where it is. Several veterans involved in this we've talked to. And the Koreans allowed us to actually excavate this crash site in 2005, but we suspended operations at that time. And we're still interested in it, and we've watched closely these developments that have been going on recently as related to Captain Hudner. I've already mentioned the 3 F-86s. The Chinese and the Russians gave us sufficient data on the 3 F-86 case sites so that for Eastern China to be able to go investigate those. There's a lot of good data on that. And then if you turn to South Korea, JPAC is really hard at work with their Korean forward element. And we're helping them by pulling the war diaries from the National Archives, so they'll have the best data when they go into a region to do their investigations there. They're about to do an investigation of a shallow water B-26 case. So that should be pretty interesting development from the South Korean side. They further mentioned, General McKee mentioned, we've made a lot of headway with the South Korean records. We have a DPMO did an MOU with the South Korean Ministry of Defense so that there would be no inhibitions, or there would be nothing to block us from going into their archives and then going into our archives. And that's being done now. The Korean Foreign Element does not just investigations, but they also do archive research. So we got some good developments going on with respect to Korean War personnel accounting, even though we're not in North Korea. And you'll hear more of these projects later on in the day from the lab than I could mention at this point. Now, before I close, one thing I want to talk about, specifically for the new people. When you sign up for a meeting, we will do a case summary, and that case summary looks like this. It'll be in your packets, and it's all the data we know up to this point on what happened to the individual who was lost, and accountability efforts, personal accounting efforts that were done either in the war era or done more recently to try and find them. And that includes oral history data that we found, textual data that we found, and our historians and so on, their work. Okay, I'm going to close with this. This is a letter written home to a family. This is an unson lost company commander wrote it back. There's a lot of such letters like this. This letter, if you read it end to end, is very indicative. This letter could be written for 7,908 cases. All the cases are just like this. And we use this as an example that we're not forgetting this. We hold these meetings because we're not forgetting this. We're not forgetting the sacrifice that these guys did. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Artola, and I thank you for your attention.
Folks, I want to apologize. You sat through a day of briefings yesterday, and then you sat through a very good briefing because I'm my boss, but it's kind of long. So I thought I'd jazz mine up. If I just press the fast forward, the advance button, slides that go through real quick and they look like a movie. So I tried that in the office this morning and it doesn't work. But I've got a fairly short brief. As Dan said, my name's Herb. Archival research is important, as he explained. It's an important part of our gathering information to locate and identify your loved ones. Today I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the varied archive sources that we use. There are three main types of records shown here that help refine our knowledge of what happened to your loved ones. As you'll see, each type has some subcategories, and they may contain helpful information. And we'll look at them in order. And by the way, this box that you see there is a standard archive box. And a full one can contain several thousand or several hundred pages, rather. And there's thousands of these boxes. I just want to say one word starting with about the National Archives. They are wonderful custodians of the records they're given. But if they're not given all the records, and we go there to look for stuff, we won't find it. And this is sometimes the case. Personnel files provide basic details of an individual person's service. Those files are located in St. Louis at the National Personnel Records Center, the NPRC. You're going to hear more about that later today. You may wonder why we look at declarations. Sometimes the award writing can contain details of the action for which the award was given. And those details can contain locational information and maybe timing on the battlefield that can be helpful for the JPAC teams when they're looking for something. The IDPF, the Individual Deceased Personnel File, which you've heard about probably in some of your one-on-ones, contain these bits of information. Sometimes there's more information, sometimes there's less. Especially for an MIA file, there's generally less. For killed in action, often they're witness statements or a summary of what happened, or a POW who died in captivity. They'll summarize what the various guys who came out of the camp said about that person when he died, that kind of thing. Second main category of records are records from the field. Here's a company clerk typing out the daily report or something. You wonder why the paper's a little stained or a little crumpled or torn when it's in the archives. It's because of the conditions they were in. They were obviously often recorded in less than ideal situations. And for example, in the first 6 months of the war, a lot of unit records are missing. Or what you get is a record for October of 1950. It's dated February 51, and it says, I certify all records were lost. And that's it. So that doesn't help a whole lot. Looking at the different services, Army records, the command reports give us overall information about units' activities, and the after-action reports often tell us a blow-by-blow chronology of what happened where. And you'll learn more about the morning reports later today, again, when you hear about the National Personnel Records Center. Air Force field search cases often provide last known lost locations. Sometimes they basically debrief the other members of the flight about what happened to that aircraft, and you'll have some of those kinds of details in them. Ship's logs often are helpful for locating the search and rescue operations that went into trying to find an aircraft that was lost. Records from the Casualty Assistance Branch include reports on specific ship losses and accidents involving casualties. So they give us some of the context of what happened. The Marine Corps, like the Army, kept unit operational reports and logs, and those are, just like the Army records, very helpful for determining where, when, that kind of thing. Their unit diaries are the same thing as the Army's morning reports, daily accountability of who's in the unit, who's not in the unit, what happened to them, in a very summary fashion. Recovered U.S. Allied prisoners of war as Dan mentioned earlier, provide records. Those records are in debriefing files. For example, this is you saw the other picture, Camp 5. This is a drawing based on a sketch by a POW. So they basically took it, they had a guy set up with Leroy lettering, and he got nice printing and all that kind of stuff to help amplify details of the camp. I'll tell you right now, there's no location, no one location in the National Archives that contains all of the debriefing files. In addition, and I do this a lot, I am sure that we do not have some debriefing files of guys who were debriefed and they didn't make it into the records that are in the archives. Sometimes the level of detail within a specific debriefing that ought to be good because they were in the same time, same, capture, whatever, and they had very little. Many of the men, the big switch returnees, the 3,000 odd guys that came out in August and September of '53, were in bad physical condition, bad mental condition. It's clear from some of them that they were adopting the mode of, I don't know, I didn't see anything, and that's their debriefing. And it's 30 pages of no, NA, or something like that. Unfortunately, others report in great detail. For example, Johnny Johnson's list on what happened. So it really varies widely. They're not, unfortunately, the Rosetta Stone of our effort to find out what happened to men who were captured. But they can provide good information. They can provide good information sometimes on march routes and stuff that Dan talked about earlier. The unknown X-Files, unidentified remains from the Korean conflict, are housed at JPAC. This is where the individual deceased personnel files are. They're considered active case file of JPAC's analysts and scientific staff, and they use them regularly in their research. Each Korean War case summary mentions the field search case, in which the serviceman, or the air search case, in which the serviceman was lost. What these were post-battle searches, to help the post-battle searches of the Graves registration team. They put together a quick summary. It's usually a one-page, sometimes a one-paragraph. They went here, they met the enemy, they had to go back to here, and then they finished the day up here. Just some random kind of coordinates and a very brief summary just to guide the recovery teams. They include a search map, and then they normally include a list of the men that are missing from that unit. Those lists, if you've gotten them or you ask for them and you get them as part of the IDPF on your loved one, often have guys line through an RMC. So this guy was actually captured, returned to military control as RMC. So they've whittled down the list, the initial starting list. They're a good starting point for us, but they're only the starting point for us in our research. Sometimes the FSC deals with one person only. Control went out, one guy lost, couldn't get it, don't know what happened, and back. And sometimes, like the Battle of Unsan or the Chosin Dan talked about, you're talking hundreds of guys on the list. Dan told you earlier about our work in the Chinese archives. We also visit other foreign archives and museums. Over the past several years, DPMO and JPAC have been in South Korea's military and civil archives. We also visited the Chinese Military Museum, which is shown at the top, and the Chinese Aviation Museum, which is shown at the bottom. Unfortunately, archival research is not like going to the public library. You can't just go in there, look in the card catalog and say, I want that file. I want information on that person, and find it right there. You go get the book off the shelf. There's a process involved in that John Zimmerly can attest to, that can be very time consuming because of the protection of the records methodology that the archives have put in place, designed to save those records forever. Numerous challenges exist. These show a few of them.